Welcome back. A top aide to Russian President Vladimir Putin is vowing that Russia will have its revenge after Ukraine claimed responsibility for a brazen attack inside Moscow that killed a top general in charge of Russia's chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons unit. Ukraine's security service says it was behind the operation, detonating an explosive device planted in a scooter next to the entrance of an apartment building. That's according to a Ukrainian source briefed on the matter who was granted anonymity because they're not authorized to speak publicly about the operation. And joining me now is Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia and an NBC News international affairs analyst. Ambassador, I want to get your reaction to the assassination of this Russian general. Are you surprised that Ukraine's security service was able to carry out this kind of operation in Moscow?
Yes and no. I've always thought that they've had these capabilities. They've been developing these kind of capabilities for a long time. They're head of these kinds of capabilities. General Budanov has talked about it. They've just never used it in this way, and that's the surprising thing. And I think that should be a signal to the rest of Russian elites that if they want to, they can carry out these kinds of operations.
Yeah, expand on that a little bit. Could this rattle Putin in his inner circle that Ukraine was able to pull this off and actually went through with executing something like this?
Well, publicly, people around Putin, the former president, for instance, Medvedev, has said there's going to be retribution. Ukrainians are going to regret this. But you've got to be rattled by this. If they did this in downtown Moscow, this is a senior, important general to the war effort. He was a war criminal, according to the Ukrainians. I want to underscore that. But that they could do this suggests that that society and that country is penetrated. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because these two countries have a long relationship. There are lots of Ukrainians that live in Russia. Tragically, there are lots of Russians that could possibly do the same in Ukraine. There's been many thwarted assassination attempts that were done towards President Zelensky, by the way. But I'm not surprised they have these capabilities, and I suspect they'll be using it more and more.
And you mentioned the retaliation threats that have already come. What do you anticipate that could look like?
I think they're going to try to do something against the Ukrainian leadership. Now, that will be hard. They live in fortified bunkers. They have lots of air defense systems. But my prediction is that you're going to see some kind of tit for tat, some senior administration official, some senior general that will come under attack from Russian special forces or Russian rockets.
All right, let's play something that President-elect Trump said yesterday about the war in Ukraine and specifically the need for a deal. Take a listen.
Many more people are being killed in the Ukraine war with Russia than is being reported, and that includes soldiers. The soldiers are being, it's a carnage that we haven't seen since the Second World War. It's got to be stopped, and I'm doing my best to stop it.
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to end this war?
He should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
What deal?
Do you think that Trump's actually engaged in the possibility of a deal here between Putin and Zelensky, or is he just messaging this here, kind of to tell them to get to the table without actually being involved? How should we interpret what he had to say yesterday?
Well, I hope he's not involved right now because he's not the president of the United States. We have one president at a time. That's a good tradition. We should keep it. But I hope he will engage when he is president and get to the brass tacks, gets to the nitty gritty. Just declaring they got to make a deal and then starting with Zelensky has to make a deal, that won't help anything. Why isn't all the focus on Putin? He's the one that invaded Ukraine, after all. Zelensky didn't invade Russia. And if he's serious about a deal, then he has to talk about some bigger things. He has to talk about, for instance, a deal that won't just be for a few years, but forever. I, for instance, think that means bringing Ukraine into NATO. That's a permanent peace that would keep the peace there for years and years. If President Trump just comes in and just tells Zelensky to give his land, lift the sanctions, and declare neutrality, that will not be a deal that the Ukrainian people will accept. And I want to remind everybody, Ukraine is a democracy. It's not like Putin's Russia. Zelensky just can't overnight say we're going to do this. There'll be a revolt if he just capitulates.
And you mentioned in an op-ed, you talk about this idea of extending the opportunity for NATO membership for Ukraine, but you say they have to give as well, right? They've got to give up territory in exchange for this membership. You write, by bringing Ukraine into NATO, Trump could achieve a significant victory for one of his foreign policy priorities, which is burden sharing. After joining NATO, Ukraine's armed forces would overnight become the best and most experienced European army in the alliance. Ukrainian soldiers could be deployed to other frontline states, allowing Washington to reduce its own troop commitments. But this give from both Putin and really Trump about allowing Ukraine into the NATO alliance would be significant. And it's something that Trump has said that he's not open to doing. Do you think he could have a change of heart once he takes the oath of office?
I certainly hope so. I've known what he said before, but I also know that leaders change their minds in extraordinary circumstances. If President Trump wants a permanent deal, not one that'll last 2 or 3 years, but a permanent one, I think this is a necessary condition. It's like what we did in Korea in 1953. It's like what we did with West Germany when we brought West Germany into NATO in 1955. And by the way, everybody said, no, 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 the Soviets will never go for that. But the Soviets don't get a vote about who's in NATO and who isn't. And never has the Soviet Union or Russia attacked a NATO country. And by the way, NATO has never attacked the Soviet Union or Russia. So that, to me, is a deal that can be made if President Trump changes his view on NATO.
Okay. Ambassador Mike McFaul, thank you for bringing us your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.